Tune in, iHeart, and on Odyssey. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson. America First with Sebastian Gorka, weekday afternoons at 3 on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. We've referenced this interview the great Thomas Sowell gave to Peter Robinson on his Uncommon Knowledge program. Interview he gave about his new book, Social Justice Fallacies. His new book, 40-something at least, at the tender age of 93, and he's still sharp as a tack, is Sowell. What a fun thinker, economist, thought leader he is. One of the things that he talked about, just looking at the last 100 years on the left, we've gone from leftist genetic determinists of the early 20th century, you can also refer to them as eugenicists, to where race was everything, to where racism is everything, as Sowell explained.
The people who believe that this was genetically determined, they said, that's it, that's the answer, and they moved on. Some other people said, let's look at it more closely. And they discovered that black soldiers from New York, New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and one or two other states, scored higher than white soldiers from Mississippi, Alabama, et cetera, et cetera. And as I mentioned in the book, people's genes do not change when they cross a state line. The problem is that when you have people who are crusading for some idea, whatever the idea is, and they find some data that fits what they believe, that's the end of the story as far as they're concerned, which is fine if there are other people with contrary ideas who will look closer for something that goes the other way.
And then get listened to.
Yes, yes.
From the progressive position a century ago to the progressive position today, racial assertions have ranged from the genetic determinism that we just discussed, which proclaimed that race is everything as an explanation of group differences, to the opposite view that racism is the primary explanation of group differences.
Yes.
How did this happen?
Oh, it happened because a lot of people arrived at the same conclusion, and they had high IQs and PhDs, and that was the end of the story as far as many people were concerned.
All right.
I mean, a high IQ and low information is a very dangerous combination.
Sorry, but you once told me, I'm talking to a Harvard man, of course, I'm very conscious of this, and you once told me, Peter, the main advantage of earning a Harvard degree is that you never again in all your life have to be intimidated by anyone who has a Harvard degree. All right.
He's so awesome. But he goes on then to tackle this racism is everything position of today's left.
Has been lower than median white family income for generations. But the median per capita income of Asian groups is more than $15,000 a year higher than the median per capita income of white Americans. Is this the white supremacy we're so often warned about? For more than a quarter of a century, in no year has the annual poverty rate of black married couple families, been as high as 10%. And in no year has the poverty rate of Americans as a whole been as low as 10%. If black poverty is caused by systemic racism, do racists make an exception for blacks who are married?
Those were excerpts that Peter Robinson read from Sowell's book, Social Justice Fallacies, and that last one I particularly like, right? So American poverty level, last 2.5 decades, never been lower than 10%. The poverty level of black married couples, never been higher than 10%. If everything is systemic racism, then explain that. This is the somebody who looked a little further than what the left settled on once they got data to support a preordained position. One other comment that Thomas Sowell made to dovetail into our next guest. School choice. School choice. Long been a proponent of school choice, probably as long as one of his mentors at this stage, Milton Friedman. Here's what Sowell had to say about it. Remember, Sowell grew up in Harlem, and so he offers an anecdote about a charter school, what he looked at as an economist, a charter school and a government school in the same building in Harlem.
Problems are all due to racists. You will get their votes. But if you look at a lot of data on different things, you discover that's not the case. It's very doubtful if all the races in the country today have half the negative effect on blacks as the teachers' unions have. Because the teachers' unions keep the schools lousy in areas where the people who send their kids to school do not have the option to send them to a private school if the schools are bad.
And then he goes on to detail this anecdote of the charter school and the government school, the straight-up public school in Harlem, in the same building, and same central demographics of the student population, and very different results when it came to proficiency in reading and math. Obviously, the charter school, significantly more proficient the percentage of students were, than the government school. And there's something there, and obviously that would extend beyond the simple explanation of systemic racism. Sowell argues, I think persuasively. For more on all of this, including that last piece, particularly school choice, please be joined again by Clarence Page. He's a Pulitzer Prize-winning syndicated columnist and Washington-based member of the Chicago Tribune's editorial board. Clarence, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's been a while.
It has. Good to talk to you. And I know there's a lot there that we ran through with Tom Sowell, but maybe particularly just on that last part, since we've had this Stacey Davis Gates flap over the last couple of weeks, and what he said about the teachers' unions, that the unions have essentially done more to retard the intellectual development of black children than all the racists in the country, is more or less what he said.
Yeah, and that's a common argument, and there's unfortunate truth to it. I decided, I swung from the anti-school choice or school voucher position to pro back in the 80s, when this was a very hot issue back in the Reagan days, in my early days of punditry. And I realized that my own family, school teachers in my own family, and friends of my family, and all, most of them were public school teachers who had their kids in private school. Yeah. And I followed up on this and found that there were, at that time, approximately 49% of public school teachers had their kids in private schools. And that was a statistic brought up by researchers, and it's still somewhere around that neighborhood. Paul Vallis cited a more updated statistic in arguing in our pages here recently for the ability of public school students to go to private school and take their funding with them, which is an issue now. In Chicago, as you mentioned, the teachers union has been very opposed to this, and even to the point of opposing the program which helps students to get into private schools, and I should say helps parents to get a tax break in Illinois for their private school tuition. And that, to me, I don't see what harm that is to the unions, but they certainly are very opposed to it because they're unions. They represent their constituents, and they
right. When the kids
primary concern.
When the kids start paying dues, they'll worry about the kids. The famous Al Shanker formulation. Or at least that's been attributed to him. Rings true. I mean, but here's the thing.
That's realistic politics, which Chicago knows as well as anybody.
Well, but here's the thing. If I was advocating that the 40,000 families who benefit from the tax credit scholarship program in Illinois, that they have their scholarships removed, disproportionately low income, disproportionately minority, I'd be called a racist.
Yep.
But I'm advocating for the scholarship program, and I'm still racist. So which is it?
Okay.
When am I being a racist? I'm confused.
Well, I always say in regard to the R word, if the shoe fits, wear it. If it doesn't fit, ignore it or argue against it, whatever.
Yeah,
But
right.
the R word, you are right, is overly used. That's why I talk about in my own family and other friends who are in the black community who have kids, and the high numbers of them who go to send kids to the private schools if they can afford it. We've seen this, of course, also occur with Barack Obama when he was president, and just about every president we've had since Jimmy Carter has put their kids in private schools, and Carter did put Amy in a public school initially, and it was a premium Washington D.C. school. And it was, I believe, in her second year they quietly transferred her to a public school. Private school. At that time, so this is not a new issue.
No.
And I don't expect it
But I
to
mean,
go
but-
away as long as you have
Right,
these
but
kind of conflicts.
what was your reaction when you heard that, CTU President Stacey Davis Gates sends her son to a private school?
I decided to write a column. That's what.
Yeah,
that was the
exactly.
inspiration for the column you're referring to. And I had written about choice in a long time, but in fact, at that time, the tax break for parents was not an issue then. It was being talked about. Now it is an issue, and the program is about to zero out at the end of this school year, I believe it is.
Calendar
the
year,
program is
right.
to hit the sunset at the end of the calendar year, right?
Right.
Exactly. And that just shouldn't happen. If you really want to have choice, there's some choice for everybody.
Well, I mean, here's the thing too. It's not just that it's not the choice that Stacey Davis Gates made for her kid, and I mean, I that's fine. I want her kid to get the best education he can get, just like everybody else. I want the same for everybody else. But here's the thing. I mean, and you know this. She is particularly obnoxious and incendiary on the topic. And I mean, and I'm not talking about, playing the victim, right wing honkies like me coming after so forth. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, the history. And you actually mentioned it in the DC scholarship program in your column. And who led that? Who led the DC scholarship fight? It was Miss Virginia Walden Ford, black mom, who they made a movie about. And in the early 90s, it was Polly Williams, a black Milwaukee city councilman working with Tommy Thompson. So the her obnoxious rhetoric that this is a vestige of white supremacy, this is a manifestation of white supremacy, and so on and so forth. This is a way to defund public schools. None of that's true. But she's not attacking me. She's attacking people like Miss Virginia and Polly Williams, as far as I'm concerned. And I just don't see enough of a reckoning for her recklessness.
Well, the reckoning is elections. She got elected to the head of the school board, teachers union, for the same reason Officer Catanzara, I don't have his whole
John
name.
Catanzara, right?
I mean, John Catanzara, very hard name to remember, John. But he was elected and reelected to the police union because of the fact that he talks tough. And this is the kind of role models that we have. I don't like it. I'd like to be more civil in our political rhetoric, but union leaders will go for what works. And it's unfortunate that we have lost a real good dialogue on this whole school choice issue, because it is not something that is racist now. I mean, Stacey Davis Gates said it was born in racism. Well, yeah, there were voucher-like programs were used to maintain segregation in the South. But now, as you know, it's really black communities, among others, that are really desperately seeking some kind of help for their parents.
Right.
To put their kids in the best school possible. So, let's not talk about that kind of history that's not really relevant, and talk about what's going on now.
Were you surprised there hasn't been more public sentiment expressed by scholarship families in Illinois? Were you surprised,
Not really.
What?
Yeah, well, I wasn't surprised because since the 80s, when I first started writing about this, I was surprised back then why more people weren't speaking out. But over time now, folks have kind of taken their different positions, and we don't really have the kind of frank discussions that can bring out the fact that black folks are very much in favor of school choice too. Those who have parents, have children. Why not? It's really something that shouldn't be a particularly racial angle, but that's because and this is where I know systemic racism is a factor, because I know after generations of being denied the best education possible that was going for white kids, we get these kind of fractured school districts and these kind of racially polarized arguments, and it's just not nuts. I mean, it's something I'm accustomed to, but when it does pop up, I feel like, oh, here's something that I can attack in my column.
Yeah, right. Well, in the column, it's a good one. Check it out. Tribune, yes, black parents like school choice too. That's from Clarence Page, Pulitzer Prize winning syndicated columnist, Washington-based member of the Chicago Trib's editorial board. Clarence, thank you as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Good to talk to you.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is the morning show more Chicago radio listeners are choosing. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
A message brought to you by Paul Davis Restoration of North Chicago. It's a beautiful summer day in the Midwest. No clouds in sight, but on the horizon we spot trouble.
Oh no! I just received a call from my condo building manager, and 3 floors burned in a fire last night. My unit was severely damaged from soot and smoke. Now what do I do? Who do I call?
You call